November 5th, 2021. Universally, this is how serendipity works for me. Linda's watching reruns of a TV show called ER for Emergency Room. It's supposedly a trauma ward. It's not like any hospital I've ever seen. Not saying it doesn't exist at this pace and speed of trauma. It's just the hospital I worked in was Mercy Hospital, or that I went to one clinical in as a witness to see what the humans were doing when I went to nursing school. When I was doing pre-medical vocabulary training and learning about medical microbiology with a microscope and lab work at the local community college. Trained by the enemy in their new technological advances in the laboratory as an American. It wasn't against the law. They apparently promote children to go into this, like they encourage them to go into these fields. I just have a problem with the actual practicing and other legal ramifications that they've developed while I'm being held in this situation. Anyway, in 1999, I had a child. Child was not a healthy baby. It was the baby that I had the skin just crack. They called it stretch marks, but it burned and it hurt so bad until it eventually healed. But I had to ask, because I'm like, first of all, I can't see it. It's underneath my stomach area where the baby is. Second of all, like, my mother never seen it. She didn't have that with me. Never heard of it. My grandmother was dead at the point that I had the baby. My mother-in-law had no idea. And so, or at least she said she had no idea. And so, but giving birth to Benjamin, and then I was slightly poisoned, but it looked like hives. But I was one of the local fish at the local supermarket. There's something happened with that. And that was when Jason had an episode of something, but I was right there by his side, and I was also affected. But I ate a different fish than he did. He had tuna, steak. I had salmon. But I had some form of allergy breakout, and I had very different symptoms of poisoning than he did. His blood pressure dropped and then spiked. I mean, it was a whole thing in the local First Med, and then they had to rush him to one of the local hospitals. I can't remember which one, but I was with him the whole time, pregnant with Ben. I was after my stomach was sliced and whatnot. But I think the wounds had healed at that point. Secondly, when I was giving birth to Benjamin, delivery-wise, I think it was Jeff Goldstein was was the doctor or the obstetrician that I was going to. There's something about Sandra Curette. I really didn't like her at all. I still don't. Something about her, just not my favorite persona. Anyway, the day that Benjamin was delivered, they said that he was SUNNYSIDE, but he had a cord wrapped around his neck, and he wound up being born almost blue and listless, like lifeless. But again, they said SUNNYSIDE, which means that his face was turned backwards. So it was a very painful birth, and then his head was all contorted in this weird manner, and it was all bruised on the top of his skull because he came through the birth canal almost like sideways, and so his head was all cone-shaped. I know some people say conical in that manner, but it's not comical, and it's not conical meaning a meniscus. Anyway, so then he didn't cry. He didn't take a. Do you wait for that? Like for them to take their first breath? I couldn't see him. They had rushed him somewhere, and then he wound up spending time. He wound up being jaundice. He had to spend some time under a special UV lamp, which it was like really traumatizing. And then I had to have an episiotomy. It was really traumatizing for the first birth, and it was hours long. And when they gave me the epidural, they misplaced the epidural. What a surprise in New York. And they numbed my hands and my upper body and my legs. But the area where the birth was taking place was incredibly painful still, or it was registering as painful. Second birth was Daniel. Daniel was pretty much flawless, except he came out, he had jaundice. I had to keep an eye and keep going back to the doctor for that. But I have an RH difference between myself and Jason. I'm a different RH class than Jason is. So there was some shot of bioengineered products that Jeffrey Goldstein said I needed. I'd never even heard of it, called RHOGAM, RHOGAM. I still don't even know if that's legitimate or if that's one of like the bullshit new enslavement and entrapment doctor things that they do to innocent bystanders. Had to have that for Benjamin because Jason and I don't have the same blood at all. We're not even slightly related. And then Daniel wound up coming out differently, but with jaundice. Alexander was perfectly healthy. Alexander didn't have, he was just his totally different classification of human or humanoid. And then Anthony. Now, when I had Anthony the third, is what I call him, my Henri Lossier from Notre Dame, my Mayan calendar baby, he had two gigantic knots in his umbilical cord, which one knot, usually the baby ceases to exist, the baby dies off. He had two, but he still lived. And while I was pregnant with him, I was so sick. I was so ridiculously, I would get so tired, and then they diagnosed me with something called preeclampsia or preeclampsia. So now that happened. Now that's an arrhythmic dysphoria where the blood pressure is not always consistent between myself and the body cavity for the baby. They usually say that it's bad for the baby, but it's also really bad for the mom. So I was taking time off, and that's why I left Chase early so I could, because I would get these spouts of, I literally, my body machine would just shut off. I had to go to sleep. I don't know if my blood pressure would just drop so significantly, but I gained such a significant amount of weight, uncontrollable, and I would just pass out, like narcolepsy almost. And so that happened. So it has not been a healthy 21 years in this New York environment at all. It was not a healthy environment the 20 years that led up to the following 20 years before or after I was forced to have children in this New York state. I mean, they broke the fettered, FETTERD link between me and outside where I was supposed to have all of my children. I don't know what they were planning on creating. I don't. But the children that I was forced to carry they're healthy now, kind of, sort of, but in the best way they can, in a convection oven of like a Jupiter belt in some FM, AM, Jason, DJ kind of a way, which ties something into this, with oversold bands of microwave and plasma that has being pulled magnetically between different bands and size bands, and then almost like they've opened up some clinical trials to study the effects. We already know the effects, you sick, weird, twisted population of healthcare workers. It's not good for the humans and their anatomy and their future offspring. We'd rather not go through it, but here I am, stuck. And I've got no money, no anything to get out of this situation, and to even hire like a private investigator to ask, what does my file even hold in it? Like, there's been nothing. So, but my health's been damaged and declining, as have the children that I held and I had. And I'm just saying that the last two children, for this purpose, being Alexander and Anthony, tier for the third, are by condor. Lizards, worms, condors, however that works, on Immaculate Conception, because there is some real problems between what we call seasons, or gets categorized as seasons, since Hadron Collider is in a Hadron Kaleidoscope, where it's almost like broken glass that they're trying to fix and they're not quite sure. No, somebody knows for sure. It's just they're not providing the correct information to land source, or land force, or sea source, or sea force. I don't know how any of that works on the interconnectedness of things. But I can tell you right now, they broke the glass, they broke my anatomy, they broke the symmetry, and now it's been dangerously off course, and they know I'm part of the missing link. I just don't know how to get to the link I belong to. Star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.